Welcome to this congregation where we seek to foster community, to grow our spirits, to serve others, and to work for justice. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your background, we are glad that you're here and we hope you feel at home. Let us enter into worship together. Today we have a very special service for you. Our speaker is David S. Wisnia, a native of Warsaw, Poland. He has performed internationally, leading services and giving concerts around the world. He served as cantor for Temple Shalom in Levittown for 28 years and recently retired after 23 years at Cantor at Har Sinai Hebrew Congregation of Trenton. Cantor Wisnia will be accompanied on piano by his grandson Avi as he recounts their recent travels back to Poland with stories about the Holocaust and music that they will perform together. Cantor Wisnia is a survivor of the notorious Auschwitz annihilation camp, where he was incarcerated for nearly 3 years, saving his life by singing to entertain the Nazi SS and cell block leaders. We welcome him to our sacred space.
Thank you, and a little bit of explanation. The music that I have learned from the finest, really the greatest cantors in Poland. You might have heard the names, the Caruso of Jewish music, really actually Cantor Gershon Sirota, from whom I learned at the age of 9.5 and 10, the aria from Tosca, believe it or not, Luci van la Stella. I was going to be a opera star. My grandson asked me to open with a song that is used monthly in the prayer book, asking for the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. It's called in Hebrew Sheivane Beit Hamikdash. It's cantorial, so you'll be treated to a little bit of that. רצון מלפניך, רצון מלפניך, רצון Torn, raton milfanecha. Yehi raton milfanecha, Hashem Elokeinu Elohei Avoteinu Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash B'meira b'yameinu V'ten chalkeinu b'toratecha Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash B'meira b'yameinu Yehi ratzon milfanecha Ratzon yehi Shebane Beit HaMikdash B'meira b'yameinu Ki me'olam ushanim kadmoniyot Shebane Beit HaMikdash B'meira b'yameinu Ki me'olam ushanim kadmoniyot Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash B'meira b'yameinu Yehi ratzon milfanecha ratzon yehi ratzon milfanecha yehi ratzon milfanecha sheyibane Beit HaMikdash Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash O b'meira b'yameinu O b'ten chalkeinu b'toratecha B'sham navadecha b'yira B'sham navadecha b'yira B'sham navadecha Osanim kadmoniyot It's a difficult thing to have people accompany this type of cantorial oratory, and how proud I am that my baby grandson here has managed to do that. And he's about the only one who's doing it really correctly. Thank you.
Hello. So I've been playing music in this community for quite a while now, and it really is a wonderful, wonderful community. And so I am very honored. As some of you know, I have been traveling with my grandfather. Some of you followed me as I was posting when we went back to Poland a couple of years ago. And since then, we've only been traveling more together and performing music that my grandfather has passed on to me, that he's taught me, stories that he's shared with me, and stories that he's been able to share with so many others. When I was growing up, I had always heard bits and pieces of my grandfather's story. I didn't know that before I came into the world, there was a time where my grandfather did not tell anyone what happened to him. There was a time where my father, his oldest son, didn't know that he was even born outside of this country, let alone what happened to him. As my father tells it, he was about 13, about to become bar mitzvah, and he asked his father where he was born. And so now to get to a point where my grandfather is able to share these stories, not only with me, not only with his family, but with others, is, I know, so important to me, and certainly so important to everyone to hear these stories. You may have seen some reports lately as we just celebrated the commemoration of Holocaust Remembrance Day just a few days ago in April. And there were a few reports about the current knowledge in this society and around the world of what the Holocaust is and what happened and how many people were affected. And all I can say is that the more that we hear these stories and the more that we listen to the people who this was affected by, the more that we give them the chance to tell their stories, the better off we will all be, and the more that these stories will live on and they won't be forgotten. You know, as I watch my grandfather with incredible strength as we've done these concerts and programs and talks, and I'm so inspired and amazed by him that he's able to do this, because I know that there are many survivors who can't or who won't. And there are many other people who just didn't survive, and we will never know their stories. But you know, it's not the responsibility of those who survived. It's not the responsibility of victims to tell their story. It's our responsibility as a society, as people, to provide the space where they can tell their stories, when they're ready and when they know that people will listen. And so, thank you for welcoming me and my grandfather to tell this story today. And may we keep asking those questions. May we keep asking people to tell their stories of what happened. So in a few moments, we're going to do the offertory, as you do every week here at UUFLB. And I usually play a selection of music. Sometimes it's, Michael Jackson or something like that. Today, I'm going to play a special selection, which is a piano piece that I actually learned when I was a little kid, just starting to take piano lessons. And I had no idea years later how meaningful this piece of music would be, because this piece of music is a prelude by Chopin. And when I went back to Poland with my grandfather in 2015, and we traveled to the place where he was born and the place where he grew up, to the place where he was imprisoned for nearly 2.5 years, to the place where he was liberated. When you fly into Poland, the first place you fly into is Chopin International Airport. And you'll hear a little bit in my grandfather's story the role that that airport actually played in his survival. But Chopin is a composer from Poland, which is where my family is from. And I always gravitated towards Chopin, and who's to say why or if there really is that connection, but just knowing now what that connection is makes it so much more meaningful for me. So as we pass around the plate for the offertory, I will play a prelude from Chopin.
closest thing to being witness to history, I'm not exaggerating, or at least I'm not, what would I call it, bragging about this, but it is a piece of history and it needs to be told. Last week was Holocaust Memorial Day, 74th or 75th anniversary. It's called Yom HaShoah V'Hagvura, which means a day of remembrance of the Holocaust and the heroism of some. I will try my best. Most people live and remember their lives in chronological order, but I see my life more as two different lives. One lived before World War II and one after. The Holocaust and the life I experienced during the 6 years of the war between 1939 and 45, I keep in a guarded place in my mind. For many years, people asked me how old I was, and I would always tell them 6 years less than my actual age, simply because I didn't want to count the years of the Holocaust. In fact, one of the first things I did when coming to the United States in February of 1946 was to have my prisoner number that was tattooed on my arm removed. And you realize plastic surgery was not perfected then. Little did I know that I wasn't going to be able to sleep well for about a year, because the surgeon did not include a piece of skin, as they do today, but he pulled the skin together and I couldn't sleep. Anyway, I did it not to have to explain what the numbers were. All that remains now is a shadow of that last digit, which is a 6 that could still be seen on my forearm. It has been nearly a lifetime, 75 years since the Russian army liberated Auschwitz, the concentration camp where I was held for close to 3 years. Please bear in mind, longevity in Auschwitz was a month at best. How did I stay there, alive and well, at least quite well, as a privileged prisoner for so long? When I consider that, I sometimes feel it is beyond my ability to fully express or comprehend what happened to me during the years of that Holocaust. I will try my best to my ability to convey and describe my life as prisoner 83526 in the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp, where I was a prisoner, as I said, for over 2.5 years. This will not be a pleasant journey, but it is my hope and my faith in God that the human race will eventually come to its senses and learn to live in peace on this earth and never repeat such a tragedy. First, you should know that there was a period before the war. My family was what you would consider well off. My father was a carpenter, and a good one, and he owned his own shop. With my mother and two brothers, we were a very close family. I was a middle child. I did well in school and could speak many languages. Please bear in mind I see there's some kids here, of course. You might be complaining you have to learn a language, Spanish or whatever. Well, I hate to tell you, I learned every single subject in 2 languages. Every subject, including arithmetic. Now, what am I talking about? My native language, Polish, of course. Everything was in Polish. And the second language, believe it or not, was Hebrew. Now, if you think a language is tough, well, let me tell you, try and multiply a bet by a samach or something like that. Murder. I spoke Hebrew, still subscribe to an Israeli paper, and if you ever saw one, it has no vowels, it's murder. Polish and German fluently, all by the time I was 10 years old. I was a little star, always singing and performing. I sang on Polish radio with an orchestra and had solos at the great temple synagogue in Warsaw, which boasted the famous tenor Moshe Kusevitsky and a choir of 80 voices, of which I was a soloist. That big temple was destroyed after the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising by the SS General Jürgen Stroop, for those of you who followed the World War II. My father was convinced that I was destined to be the next great opera star. A precocious young man, it always had supporters and fans and girlfriends, or what you might call today groupies. Shortly after becoming bar mitzvah at the age of 13, my singing career and my happy childhood and the life I knew came to an end. Oh, not all at once, but gradually. The Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, right the day after my birthday, August 31st. And they were very strategic to methodically strip us of all our rights, little by little. First our belongings, our citizenship, and eventually our homes and our lives. As they began rounding up the sprawling population of Warsaw, and Warsaw was a city of 1 million population. This wasn't a little town, this was everything, radio, opera, what have you. A beautiful city, as it is, thank God, back again today. There was a huge Jewish population in Warsaw, as in any major city. Please bear in mind that the population of Poland was 31 million, of whom 10%, around 3 million, were of the Jewish faith. My family was not sent to the Warsaw Ghetto, but rather the Warsaw Ghetto came to us. We were right in the corner where the gates were. We already lived in an apartment within the area that would become the ghetto. But cramming nearly 700,000 souls into an area of a few square city blocks, you can imagine, made life very hard and took its toll. My father was able to get a job working outside of the ghetto because he was such a wonderful carpenter himself and befriended one of the Luftwaffe officers at that Chopin airport that my grandson talked about before. For some reason, one day, call it premonition or whatever, my father asked me to go in his place, to be able to clean, to be able to do something. I still do not know to this day how in the world this worked itself out. I was thrilled to be outside of the ghetto walls for once, but when I came back home, I found my street blocked off. I was 16 years old that day when I became an orphan. The image and sound and feel of discovering my freshly murdered family it's still in a pile outside of our building, has not left me and never will. Panic, terror, horror, unspeakable grief. I found out later that they tried what they call a selection of trucks, get the people to see how fast they can get them to get their belongings and get on the trucks. They didn't take them anywhere. It was just a trial. To Treblinka, you might have heard the name. I had very little time to mourn. I will never forget the sleeve that when I turned over my mom's. Please bear in mind, my mom was 37 years old. My father was 41. My one brother who was with them was 2.5 years younger than I, and the other one, I was a middle child. The other one was 2.5 years older, and he had escaped the ghetto walls before that. I did the only thing I could think to do. I ran. And with the help of one of my righteous Christian girlfriends, through an unfinished fence of the ghetto, and with the aid of one of our neighbors, non-Jewish neighbors, I managed to escape Warsaw. This was the beginning of a series of escapes, and I tell you, I would not be here today, pardon me, if it were not for the help of those many non-Jews, what some might call today righteous Gentiles, who risked their lives to harbor me and smuggle me from place to place. I could only hide for so long. In December 1942, I was finally found without papers, ration cards, or whatever you call it, and transported from the ghetto of Novodwor, a place not too far from Warsaw, to a place called Oświęcim in Polish, Auschwitz in German. Of the 1,500 people on that train that we made the trip to Auschwitz, 580 men were selected to work. And we already heard the stories that only the people who can work will be kept. Anyway, the rest, more than 900 people, were all murdered. I know it's a sad story. what do I say, murdered. The crematoriums in Auschwitz-Birkenau were not ready yet. Only one of those crematoriums was functional. Today, as I stand here before you, of all the people of my particular transport that came in, which was around 1,500, I am the only survivor left to tell this story. At the end of the war, there were 6 of us. I can only try and describe life in Auschwitz, but words do not do it justice. We were condemned to live in a cesspool where evil reigned supreme, where all religious, moral, cultural, social, and judicial restraints on human behavior were ignored. I put these words together, or better still, unlearned. The bonds that hold humans together into civilized entities were torn asunder and blatantly disregarded. When there are no legal or social sanctions against murder, life reverts to a jungle. And Auschwitz-Birkenau was a jungle of such ferocity that jungles in the world would be ashamed to be associated with it. My first job in Auschwitz, and I don't even want to go into the selection process, when I heard the SS men say to the so-called doctor of the SS at the train station, "Alle über 18 zum Lager." That's when I became 18. I was only 16, but I learned quickly that I better be born in 1924 instead of 1926, which was the case. As a matter of fact, all my records, even today, I never changed them. They state that I was born in 1924. I was not. I was born in 1926. My first job in Auschwitz was to collect the bodies of those who willingly committed suicide. I know it's a terrible story, but it needs to be told because there are still people who claim this didn't happen. My first job, as I started telling you, was to collect the bodies. I was strong enough, a tall kid. Those who willingly committed suicide by stepping on that trip wire, a deep ravine, electrified barbed wire fence, so once you stepped over that little trip wire, the guard in the sentry box would shoot you, and my job was to collect the first couple of weeks. Anyway, I near the perimeter of the camp. This was gruesome work, conveying corpses by wheelbarrow to a nearby pit in the ground. At the end of the day, I could see the results of my day's work. Had I continued doing this day after day, I would have never survived. After a while, on the way back to the cell barracks, which housed about 450 prisoners, the cell block leader yelled out, "Who can sing?" Well, everybody knew Wisnia sang. I was ushered in front of the SS and their drunken parties on occasion, and that happened in 1944, for what could only be considered an audition for my life. At that time, believe it or not, even in Nazi Germany, the Andrews Sisters were popular. I don't know if any of you know of the Andrews Sisters. And I sung one of their most popular songs, Guess what? By mir bist du schön, and they loved it. And from that point on, I became a privileged prisoner. People often ask me, what does it mean to be a privileged prisoner in the hell of Birkenau? It basically meant one thing, that I could live another day. And this became my motto. Just another day, just another day. I did not receive better sleeping quarters, but I did receive a new job working in the relative warmth of the clothing, what they call sauna, where we would inspect, find, look for hidden gold, money of the transports that used to come in, and disinfect the clothes taken from the new arrivals to the camp. Even still, I could not avoid a harsh punishment for doing something like missing a morning roll call, and that's what killed most of the prisoners, a mistake for which I was beaten with an inch of my life and hanged with a noose around my neck. It's recorded, believe it or not, all on record, believe it or not. They kept perfect records. At the Auschwitz Museum in Poland, they recently discovered some documents where the Nazi guards recorded their punishments. And those people gave me a copy that shows my prisoner number and the date this incident happened in 1943. It's very difficult to condense 2.5 years to a few moments. But I can share with you one of my most powerful memories of my time there. People always associate Auschwitz-Birkenau with the famous sign at the entrance of that labor camp, which says in German, Arbeit macht frei, which means work makes you free. But the truth is, we prisoners were not kept in that part of the camp for long in Auschwitz. That was mostly for Polish political prisoners, Christians who opposed the Nazi regime, socialists, communists, people who opposed the German occupation. Other than the arrival and selection, I was hardly in Auschwitz I at all. Shortly after surviving selection, as I said to you before, by lying about my age, I was marched over to the adjacent camp, Birkenau, named after the birch trees that surrounded the camp. But this was to be nothing more than a death camp. Once we got to Birkenau, the Nazi guards ordered us to remove our clothing. As I was doing this, one SS officer in particular stood over me, checking me, threateningly, and I came face to face. You can imagine, he looked to me like he was 12 feet tall. I came face to face with the shiny belt buckle. My eyes were fixed on his belt buckle. And you guess what it said on that belt buckle, emblazoned with a swastika. Gott mit uns. Any of you who understand German, it means God is with us. I looked at it, and I had to hold myself from horribly busting out laughing. God is with you? I thought, not my God, not the God that I learned about. I was astonished and I was furious in that moment, but even more so, I became determined. I became a person with a mission. I was determined to keep living, determined to prove the obscenity of that damn belt buckle. That buckle served as the supreme catalyst driving my single-minded determination to live just another day, just another day. I was determined to outlive him. And I said that to myself, I'm going to outlive you. To outlive them all, and had to live a worthy, meaningful life, free from that place. I committed to a personal challenge. No matter what it took, I would survive to bear witness. And I am here, able to proudly affirm, standing here before you today, I won that challenge. Thank you. Towards the end of the war, as the Russians approached Auschwitz, Birkenau, we could hear the artillery. The Germans began to process or liquidate the camps. Despite their commitment to the righteousness of their cause, they tried to destroy the evidence of what went on in these places. If you visit Auschwitz today, they have done quite a job of trying to preserve documents and artifacts in as many of the buildings as possible. In fact, the bunk where I slept is still there, or was there last year, with my name chiseled into the stone next to where I lay my head. And my grandson, when I took him there, found it just about, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, when we went to Auschwitz. But before they left, the Nazis blew up the crematoria, and all that remains of them now is rubble. We were marched out of Auschwitz in rows of 5 in what is now known as a death march. 1944, fast forward. That is how I ended up in the German camp, Dachau. As strange as it may sound, Dachau was no Birkenau. Where Birkenau demanded order, deathly order, Dachau was chaos, absolute chaos. No food, no death, disease, everywhere. I immediately knew that I would not survive even a few days in Dachau. We're talking now about January 1945. I was able to survive initially because I was able-bodied enough to volunteer for a work detail that involved carrying cement blocks. I was so good at it that the Nazis decided to put me on yet another train to do the same at a place called Mildorf. It was there, when Allied planes came, roared overhead, and strafed our train, that I was able to make a violent escape from that transport. As incredible as my escape now seems, for me, the start of my second life is where the real miracle happened. After my escape, I was totally alone, running through the woods. I am now in Germany. I knew that. I found an abandoned barn where I found some bread, moldy cheese. There was enough food there to eat. I ate, slept, and hid during the day and walked towards the artillery fire at night. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I followed the sounds of the guns. After the second night, just as dawn was breaking and was getting ready to find another place to hide, I heard a great roar off in the distance. I thought maybe it was Soviet artillery. I climbed a small hill to see if I could get a better look. There below, almost as far as I could see, sneaked a column of tanks, jeeps, army trucks, but it was too far away to make out the markings. I had no idea who these tanks belonged to. For all I knew, it was German, and I would be recaptured and shot on the spot. If I ever prayed, I prayed hard. Please, dear Lord, don't let there be a swastika or a black cross on that lead, on that tank. And as the entourage barreled down the highway, it got close enough to where I could see the outline of a white star. I remembered seeing stars on the planes that strafed my transport. The Russian planes, they had stars also, but their stars were red. But who cared? Red, green, white, as long as it wasn't a swastika or a black cross. I began running with all my might toward the column of tanks that ended up directly in front of them on the highway. I don't know if any of you people have ever seen the Tiananmen Square where that guy stood with his, hands raised. That's the picture, and that's what they're working on. They're going to make, from what I assume, a screenplay out of this. Well, and if you think I'm important standing here in front of you today, well, I'll tell you, that entire column of jeeps, tanks, stopped. This is 6 o'clock in the morning. That whole column stopped. Imagine in the middle of the morning a young, dirty kid jumping in front of a whole army. After a few months, by the way, these were the remnants of the 101st Airborne that became my family. The 506 Parachute Infantry, H Company, of which I am a proud member, and never left them until I came to Hoboken in February of 1946. After a few moments, it's important to tell you, that lid opened on that lead tank, and out popped Captain James L. Walker from South Carolina. Now, my English wasn't very polished, because when you learn a language, what do you learn? First you learn is dirty words, basically. Or words. You don't learn sentences. And as James Walker comes out of that tank, I walk over to him and I said, "You Russian?" He says, No, American." "Well, yeah, man. I'm listening. This doesn't sound like English to me. But I had never in my life heard anything like that thick Southern drawl. I couldn't make out one thing he was saying. All I got is, "Where you escape from?" Escape. Yes, he got the idea. "Are they SS?" I says, "Yes, I got that. He wants me to take him back where I escaped. I have no intention of going back anywhere." We also heard stories, of course, that some of the Nazis, the SS particularly, disguised themselves in American uniforms. And we saw some atrocities that they really perpetrated. Anyway, I didn't want to believe it, so you'll get a kick out of this. We heard rumors of these soldiers disguising themselves. After some more unsuccessful, this is funny, I said, "You American, any Polish?" I figured if he's American, they gotta have somebody who speaks Polish. Well, yeah, we got one. That whole column pictured is, you're gonna see it, I hope, in the movie. That whole column stopped, and on the side of the road, a Jeep comes up with Fred Wilczek from Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Fred Wilczek comes up front, and he started to say some words in Polish. But let me tell you, his Polish was worse than my English. And it was worse than anybody's. I couldn't understand him. So I had another idea. And this is all going on early in the morning. I said, "Anybody Yiddish?" You see, in Europe, you don't say Jewish. You follow, it's an English word. It's Yiddish because that's the language most of these guys speak. They don't speak Hebrew, they don't speak, really. So the idea was, let's see if he can get it. He says, "Yeah, we got one." He yells down, "Harry Wiener, Harry Wiener." A Jeep comes up with Harry Wiener in it from Tarzana, California. And Harry starts talking Yiddish. I don't speak Yiddish altogether, but that's beside the point. I would understand him. So he says, starts giving me Yiddish words. Ich glaube, worse than Fred's Polish. But I understood, I figured out that if he's trying to get me somebody who speaks Polish, somebody who speaks Yiddish, they've got to be Americans. Anyway, if they were going to go through all that trouble, they weren't going to hurt me. And that is how a Polish-born Auschwitz prisoner became a part of the United States 101st Airborne, 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment. I worked on my English and became quite proficient at it. And they put me to work as a translator and also taught me how to use a Thompson machine gun. I have a picture here of myself. And I was a pretty good-looking kid, really. And you will see with my gun, the group adopted me as their little Davy. And you know, the greatest thrill to me is I am given the greatest honor each year when we meet for our gathering in the winter, what do they call it? The snowbird reunion in Tampa, Florida. And little Davy is introduced. Our own little Davy is going to sing the National Anthem. And it is the greatest thrill to me. I was presented with my own U.S. Army uniform. I traded in my old self and became reborn. From then on, I considered myself 110% American. And that was the beginning of my second life, because they saved my life. I never left that group until we came, as I said to you, to Hoboken, New Jersey. And my mom had her older sister waiting for me. She came here in World War I, married with a family, and also her younger sister living in the Bronx. And when she looked up and saw me in full uniform, I will never forget, she said to her sister, You see, that's Davy up there. So the other one, Aunt Rose says, no, that's an American. It's a GI. She says, yeah. Anyway, I do discuss my one voice, two lives, and how I built my life and made a beautiful family as a proud American citizen. And let me tell you, it hurts me when I see somebody desecrate the flag. It hurts me. Or use some horrible remarks about America. Yes, they need a couple of weeks in Auschwitz to appreciate this country. I now understand when the Pope comes here or goes any place, he kisses the ground. Well, I kiss the ground of the United States. The very idea that I could have a grandson who can accompany me, and I, by the way, composed 2 songs. While in Auschwitz, somebody smuggled them out, and I'm going to sing it for you right now. I don't know if any of you understand Polish, but it's written in Polish, and it took 30-some years for somebody to translate it into English. Would you believe it? Well, let me tell you. The parody that I have on Oświęcim, do you have it?
I think you guys have it in your program. They actually have the translation in their book.
How about the Polish version first? Okay, it's only a couple of minutes. Go ahead. Became quite popular with the inmates. Gdy przypominam sobie, that's Polish, sławny Oświęcim, czułem się jak w grobie, you see it rhymes, widząc krematorium dym, błoto wzdłuż i wszerz, błotem szyja, błoto nogi też. Apel, Abstand, mitten up, that's German. To słyszałem wciąż, cały dzień kręciłem się jak wąż. Oświęcim, ja tłukłbym ciebie, ile w lizie Oświęcim. Gdy cię wspominam, to mnie gryzie Oświęcim, Oświęcim. Taki właśnie jest ten Rym. Za twe spanie i jedzenie, szlak na twoje pokolenie. Oświęcim, that's a curse. Ciebie ile bliżej Oświęcim. Bóg za wszędzie, wszędzie, wszędzie Oświęcim, Oświęcim. Serce masz jak stal, gardzę tobą, mam do ciebie żal. Auschwitz, I hate you anyway, it tells the story of it. It took 30 years for somebody, see, Polish doesn't lend itself to short words that rhyme, really. So we got it together, and this kid here, believe it or not, put it together, and we're going to publish it too. He translated it, and here is how it goes. I remember it so clearly, my days in Oświęcim. He just did it about how long ago? What would you say? It's about a year? Is it? Yeah. Got out alive just nearly, and still the name it stings. Still I see that place, enduring like the scars I can't erase. You see it, right? Apel, Abstand, mitten up. heed the sharp-hearer's call. You'll wish you were just never born at all. Auschwitz, through rain and sickness, always working. Auschwitz, with death behind you, always lurking. Auschwitz, Auschwitz, evil like some twisted dream. Never mind the hope of fleeing, hunger is the only being. Auschwitz, like numbers on my arm it lingers. Auschwitz, I curse you with my broken fingers. Auschwitz, Auschwitz, heart be hard as stone. Hatred is the greenest weed you've grown. Avi.
I will say, at the end, my grandfather, we are very grateful that his memoir, the story of his life, was published recently. And so at the end, when we do coffee and fellowship in the other room, he'll have copies of the book if you're interested. And we made him a website, so even if you don't want to get it now, you can later. And there are videos that we've made, and so you can certainly take information. And it's helpful to also pass along the story and share the story and keep the story alive. So we'll see you in there.
Thank you. The greatest thrill to me is the notes, the letters I get from some of the kids, in the various schools that I talk to. It's just incredible, absolutely incredible. If I have contributed anything to making this world a little bit better, that's my motto. Make, using the 2 words in the book of Genesis, believe it or not, where God speaks to Abraham and he blesses him. And it says, Hayeh bracha, be a blessing. And that's my motto. Not just to have a blessing, but be a blessing.